I'm an 8th generation farmer. We have about 800 acres in production as far as row crops. That's a corn, wheat, and soybean rotation. I try to have some early soybeans, but I do like the wheat with double crop bean rotation. A lot of our early crop soybeans, of course, that'll go to corn next year, and that's where we use a lot of our cover crops at. Most all of our wheat will go behind corn. So the cover crops, normally we're trying to fly those on top of early beans that are losing their leaves this time of year, and we get an early start on our cover crops that way. And we've been working with the NRCS. This is our 2nd year with cover crops. Really, the way to go is just the more the better. You know, a lot of these cover crops are the seed's pretty cheap, and anytime you can add more in there, you know, you're going to be better off. Because some things, last year it got really dry. Well, we had trouble with the rye, but for some reason the clover just came on, and it came on late, which I was surprised with. But before we put it on, I was, you know, should I put this clover in? And that pretty much told me there, put everything in, you know, put all you can in. Right now I'm running a cereal rye, oats, crimson clover, Australian winter peas, and then we're doing the radishes. Like I said before, there's so many benefits that you don't even realize, you don't think about. You know, there's no good way around it. If you have a 3-acre wet spot in the middle of a 100-acre field, well, you can come back and plant that when it dries out, or you can kind of, you know, 9 times out of 10, you just plant right through it. But the cover crops, it seemed to dry it out just a little bit. I planted right through it, and I had no trouble with the corn coming up. You know, a lot of times we have sidewall compaction and stuff in the wet spots, planting corn early, and a lot of the fields just right to plant, and you hit those little dips and those little swags, and it's a little bit too wet, but you kind of just plant on through it. But these cover crops, you know, I had no trouble with it coming up. There's a lot to these cover crops that people don't even know yet, you know, and I don't understand all of it yet, but I think they're going to learn more and more that just keeping something growing on the field, keeping something active, you're pretty much doing all you can to help save your soil, which is basically, that's what this job is. You know, as a farmer, that's all you've got is that soil. We had good residue on this farm left a few years ago on top of the ground. There was no cover crop though, and you would think, you know, there was a corn crop that we didn't plant to wheat, and it was a good corn crop, tons of residue. It washed just like you had dished it up, you know, and by putting those cover crops on, it grabs everything and it keeps from washing. And you can go through a field and you think that it's not washing that bad. You might just see a couple of little, they're not even ditches. They're just little, maybe a ½ inch deep, little spots that wash off the side of a hill. Well, that's a whole lot of dirt. And, you know, I know because I've went down the bottom of that hill and I've loaded that dirt back up and hauled it back up to the top to fix some spots. And when you start loading the dirt that get washed off, it's load after load after load. And that's when you start thinking, I've got to do something if I'm going to have anything left. We got dry early on when it was determining ear size and things like that. And the fields that I had cover crops on, I hadn't shelled any of them yet, but I mean, just by counting kernels, you can tell, you know, there's something a little bit different about this. And you know, if you didn't know any different, you would be saying, what'd you do different in this field? I didn't do anything different but cover crops. And I'm thinking next year, the more years I do this, I'm going to cut back on fertilizer a little every year, because that, you know, the amount that's left on top of the ground is what saved that crop. Just, you know, it didn't dry out as bad. But I think there's going to be so much residual left from these cover crops that I want to try to cut back some every year, and eventually get to the point to where I think you could cut your nitrogen by 1/3 by the time that, you know, it's going to take 3 or 4 years getting into that. But with the way the markets are up and down, and the way these fertilizer prices, they don't quite come down as quick as the markets come down. So a man's going to have to do something to stay competitive and to stay successful at farming. If you're not gonna change anymore, you might ought to look at a different occupation, because farming is changing quick, and you're gonna have to stay right on the cutting edge of things, or you're kind of going to get left behind. And the NRCS is definitely helping me. Cover crops are going to be the key.